Most musicians spend years practicing chords and scales, but never ask, how does music work the way it does? Why does music work the way that it does? Today I'm going to answer that question for you. But we're going deeper than music theory. We're going beyond it to philosophy, because there are three core philosophical principles, simple philosophies of music, that if you understand them will simplify your theory and change the way you think and hear and even play music. And these aren't abstract concepts. These are core philosophical truths about music that shape and underpin everything we play, from the simplest melodies to the most complex theoretical concepts you can think of. And if you can really understand these three philosophical concepts, it'll strip away so much confusion and will dramatically simplify your understanding of music theory. Because like I've said in the past, music theory can be as complicated as you want to make it. But if you understand it philosophically, you'll see all the building blocks that make all the music that we play. All right, before we get to the video about the philosophies of music, I have something very special I've been wanting to share with you guys, something I've been working on for months. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I talk about the three-step method: analysis, transposition, and visualization. And the visualization part of it has been pretty lacking. I've been trying to make assets, and it takes me forever to edit these videos, and it's like 1% of what I actually see when I'm playing. So I started working on a visual to help me edit these videos, and it got more involved. So what started as a visual aid for helping me edit videos, for making editing videos easier, has somehow turned into like a full-blown project. I am building a music visualization app. I'm coding it myself. I've been building it for almost a year, and it's nearly done. So here's what it does. It listens to you play. It transcribes what you're playing in real time, which is amazing on its own. But it also analyzes what you're doing in relation to scales and tonal centers and chord changes as you're playing them. So you can see in real time what you're playing and how it relates to what you're playing. So if you're playing over a 2-5-1, it'll show you what you're playing, and say you throw in a tritone substitution, it'll show you your flat 9s and your flat 13s as you're playing them in real time, which is amazing. But it has a bunch of other really cool features as well. It's got a playback system. You can import your own chord changes if you want to play specific songs, or you have a 2-5-1 you want to work on, or you want to work on just a 3-6-2-5. You can loop it and play it over and over again. It also has a library, so you can save licks that you want to play, or licks that you've been learning. Or say you take a killer solo, you can save it in the library. And the reason that's important is for two things. One, you can export that as sheet music. So like, say you're playing over tune and you play a killer solo, you can export the sheet music as a lead sheet with chord changes in your solo. So it's amazing. Or say you're learning a melody and you don't want to write it out, you can just play the melody in the app and then export it as sheet music. But here's where it gets crazy. This is really exciting. And it's like blows my mind that this is something that I've been able to do and I'm doing. I'm building an AI for the app. It's a custom AI for the app. It is trained on how music works, and it gets to know, it's your own personal AI. It gets to know how you play. It learns from your solos, it learns from the sheet music you put in, licks that you play or licks that you want to play, and really learns how you play. And the more you use it, the better it gets at understanding how you play and suggesting in real time how to approach turnarounds. So picture this, you're playing in the app, you're playing along to a song, the AI knows how you play, and there's a turnaround coming up, a 2-5-1, it can suggest in real time, or will suggest in real time, possible turnarounds to navigate that AI based on how you would naturally play and you would resolve based on how you play and the licks that you put in the system in your library that you want to play or that you do play. It's like having a transcriber, a teacher, a practice partner, and a performance assistant all in one in real time at your fingertips. Basically, I've taken the 30 years of knowledge and practice and experience that I have, and I've distilled it into a just incredibly powerful tool that you're going to be able to have at your fingertips to help you study and play and perform. I'm like, it's exciting. I'm very excited about how it's turned out. It's turned into something much more than I originally planned on or could have envisioned when I first started working on the project. And things just snowballed, and once I realized I could do things, I just did them. So I'm really excited about it. It's going to be coming out, if everything works out correctly, sometime in November, towards the end of November. And I'd love for you guys to help me test it. When I first put it out, it's going to be the alpha test, free test version, and the first 50 people that come in and help me test it and give me feedback, just really try to get all the bugs out, are going to get some subscription perks later on. So keep an eye out for that. In the next couple of videos, at some point, I'm going to announce it and have codes for you guys and all that. So yeah, I'm really excited to share this app with you guys that I've been working on for almost a year and just give you the tools that I wish I had when I was learning to play music. And now I'm building them, and I'm going to give them to you guys. So all that to be said, keep an eye out for those videos, and let's get back to the philosophies of music. This first concept changed the way I think about music fundamentally forever. So music, like other things in the world, in the universe, is made of smaller building blocks. Because we tend to think of music as an abstract, it's a sound, it's a concept, but it's a physical thing. It's waveforms and math and blah, blah, blah. We don't have to get into any of that to understand the fundamental building blocks of music, which are notes, of course. But this concept of what notes are, I heard this when I was in college, and it took some time for it to sink in. It changed the way I think about music. It changed my whole approach to music. And it's a very simple concept. Like, it's laughably simple, this concept, but it took a long time for me to truly understand what it meant. And if you can just accept this first philosophical concept, put aside whatever preconceived notions you have, accept this, it will change the way you approach music and will simplify music. And the first concept is that even though notes acoustically are different, they're different pitches, of course, they are all built the same. Everything is the same. And that sounds simple, of course. But for example, C, E, G, that major triad, C, E, G, is exactly the same as C sharp, E sharp, G sharp. Even though the notes are different, even though acoustically you're having different pitches, that structure, that building block, those three notes in that form, they are exactly the same. C, E, G, D, F sharp, A, G, B, D, C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, they are all exactly the same. Really take some time to think about that. They're the same. Just accept it. Those notes are exactly the same. Like I said, it seems like a very simple concept, but it can be hard to wrap your brain around and just accept it. They're the same. But here's where it gets fascinating. Those notes are the building blocks of the next philosophical concept, the DNA of music, major scales. Now, the second philosophical truth about music, which is glossed over, I feel like people never talk about this, is that the major scale contains all of the information you need to have all of the building blocks of all of Western music, which is a bold statement to make. But really sit with that for a minute. Your major scale contains all of the information you need to understand all of Western music. It's a mind-blowing concept. But it's true. But that's why people always tell you, go learn your major scales. And I feel like people have forgotten why they say, go learn your major scales, or never knew why you needed to learn your major scales in the first place. But it's because those major scales contain the fundamental building blocks of music, which are notes. And specifically, the reason all of the information is in your major scale to understand all of Western music is because of the resolution tendencies of your notes of your major scale. Now, I've talked about this in another video that I'll pin at the end of this. So I'm going to briefly go over that again, just talk about how the resolution tendencies work. I go really in depth in that video. It's only 7 minutes long, but I give you a ton of information. And I'm just going to go over it real quick. So come with me to the piano and I'll show you how the resolution tendencies. So like I said, I'm going to go over this very quickly because I've discussed it in another video, which you can watch more in depth. But this is just easy to visualize on a piano. So you have your C major scale, all of the notes of C major. Your resolution tendencies work like this. So you have the 1, the 3, and the 5. These are stable notes in your scale. They don't want to move. Your 2 wants to resolve to your 1. Your 4 wants to resolve to your 3. Your 6 wants to resolve to your 5. And your 7 wants to resolve to your 1. And those resolution tendencies give you all of the chord changes and resolutions in Western music. So you've probably heard of modes, which I hate discussing because they are a distraction and a crutch to keep you from understanding what's actually going on. Modes are just references to the different scales that are built off of the different scale degrees of your major scale. But all the different notes of your scale give you all of the chords for all of your chord changes. So if you're just thinking about modes, you're missing the point because you're not thinking about the resolution tendencies of all these different notes and how that affects the chord changes and how those notes and the chords and scales associated with those notes are the building blocks of the fundamental building blocks of music, and music theory specifically. And all of those building blocks and their resolution tendencies make your chords resolve in a certain way. But here's part of this concept as well. All of those notes and all of the chords associated and scales associated with those notes of your major scale, those 7 notes, are all in the tonal center. They're all part of the tonal center. It's all in the same key. For instance, look at your simplest relationship, your 5-to-1 chord change. That's your simplest resolution you have. And the reason that works is because, and you can look at my last video about music theory and how all this works in great depth, but long story short, your 5 chord pushes you back to your 1 chord. And why does it do that? Because it has the notes of your major scale in the 5 chord that have resolution tendencies that push you back to your 1. For instance, the 3 of your 5 chord is the 7 of the tonal center. And the 7 of the tonal center is a very strong resolution sound, very strong resolution to push you to your 1. So all of the notes of your 5 chord push you back to your tonal center. So that's how chords work. They're all part of the tonal center, and the resolution tendencies of those notes in the chord are what push you, are what cause resolutions, because those notes want to resolve. They want to move in a certain way. So your 5-1 is your strongest and simplest resolution. And after that, you have the 2-5-1, and the same thing is happening there. All of the notes of your 2 chord want to move, and they want to move to your 5 chord. And then your 5 chord really wants to move to your 1 chord. So same thing there. The resolution tendencies of the notes of your 2 chord want to push you to your 5 chord, which then wants to push you to your tonal center. So all these things are in the tonal center, and because of how the resolution tendencies work, that's how your chords work. This is where people get lost. This is where I got lost for a long time, actually. But when you start adding secondary dominants to your scales, your chord changes, your Western harmony and specifically your jazz harmony can get very complicated if you let it, if you don't understand and think about your fundamental relationships, your philosophical relationships, how the scales are built, and how those resolution tendencies work. So you have your 5-1, your dominant 1 relationship. You have your 2-5-1, minor 2 to a dominant 5. And I should say, back in the day, they used to make the 2 dominant because it had a stronger resolution. Because if you have a dominant chord, the 3 of that dominant chord is the major 7 of the next chord that it's pushing to. Some people still do that depending on what song you're playing, what area you're trying to play in. People will still make the minor 2 a dominant 2, but it's not the sound nowadays. It's not a fashionable sound. Anyway, so you have your 5-1 relationship, you have your 2-5-1. Now, what is your 5 relationship, your secondary dominant of your 2 chord? It's your 6 chord. Now, if you look at your tonal center, and if you spell out the chord and the scale for your 6 chord, it's a minor scale. And you can leave it that way. A lot of songs you'll hear when they resolve to the 6, it's minor, obviously. That usually happens in pop. Sometimes it happens in jazz, depending on what you're trying to do. A lot of times, jazz harmony will make the 6 chord dominant, and this is where people get lost. When you want to make a stronger resolution, to make it a secondary dominant, specifically the word there is dominant, you need to alter your 6 chord. It can't be minor if you're making it dominant. So, example, if you're in the key of C, your 6 is A. It's A minor. You're trying to resolve to D. So you need to make your 6 chord dominant. So what does that do? You raise the 3. You make it a major 3. So now you have A dominant. So that, what is the 3 of A? It's C sharp, which is your 7 of D. It pushes you to D. It's a very strong resolution. But now you need to make sure that you notate the alterations that are going on with your 6 chord for the scale that is associated with your 6 chord in order to show people that you're still in the key of C. Because the relationship there is you are resolving to a melodic minor instead of a natural minor, because the D is part of C, and so the D chord is not a natural minor. It's a melodic minor. That's where that term melodic minor comes from. So the alterations on the 6th chord, you'll see a flat 13, because that is showing people that you're still in the key of C. And why a flat 13? Well, it comes back to what key you're in and what chord you're resolving to, what scale you're resolving to. You're resolving to D. The 3, D is minor. So you have D, F, A. Now in the key of A dominant, you would have an F sharp. It would be A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. That's A dominant. But because you're resolving to D minor, you need to notate the fact that you have an F in there, not an F sharp. So what is F in relation to A? It's the flat 13. So you have A dominant, flat 13. That's just showing people that you are resolving to the 2 of a scale. You're showing them that that's not a regular dominant. You're resolving to that's a secondary dominant because you have the flat 13 in there. And this is where people get lost because you start getting lost in the alterations and like what's happening and the scales associated with it. The scale is still C. The only alteration there is the raised 3, is the C sharp. Everything else is still in the key of C. You're just showing people from the alteration and the chord change that you're letting them know what the scale is. You're letting them know that you're in C, that you're just resolving to the 2 chord. And what's really important here is that you're showing them the secondary dominant is not a standalone scale, it's not a standalone chord, it's not its own piece here. It's part of a larger structure, it's part of these building blocks. And people get lost because they see these chord changes and they look at each one as an individual scale, as an individual piece of its own thing. They're not thinking of the larger structure that it's a part of. So even though the 3 of the 6, the C sharp, is out of the key of C, it's all in the tonal center. I know that's hard to understand, but it's all just showing you that this is just an assign to give you a stronger resolution to push you back to your tonal center. So all of this is all part of the same tonal center. And you can just keep adding secondary dominants in this way, and this really loses people because you have these secondary dominants with all these alterations, but those alterations are just to keep your tonal center intact and to keep the resolution tendencies of your tonal center intact so that you're constantly being pushed back to the tonal center because the resolution tendencies are the building blocks of all of Western music, of all of the music that we play. And this is where your scales come from. And like I said, this is where most people get lost, but you won't now that you understand the building blocks of the scales. Scales and chords, in theory, are a result of how music functions, not the cause. And this is the third fundamental truth of music, the third philosophical concept you really need to wrap your head around, that scales and chords and music theory are a byproduct of major scales and how the resolution tendencies work. I shouldn't even say major scales. Major scales, chords, scales in general, all your alterations you can think of, all the music theory is a byproduct of how the resolution tendencies work, of how things resolve naturally because of how music is built harmonically and mathematically. All of the things we talk about are all a byproduct of the fundamental building blocks of music. So you need these different scales to account for your different chord changes, your secondary dominants, and you break your scales down, you look at each note of the scale and you spell them out, and you get very interesting scales to play. You get your major scales, you get your minor scales, and then when you get to secondary dominants, you get all your altered scales. Like for instance, the sixth dominant 6 chord of any scale, of any key, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. So you end up with these really interesting scales and chord changes because of the secondary dominants and the alterations you have to make to those to have strong resolution tendencies, but also keep your tonal center and your fundamental resolution tendencies intact. But people get lost in the chord changes and the scales and forget the big picture. Forget that it's all part of the same key, it's all part of the same tonal center. And that can be hard to remember because you can use these secondary dominants to modulate all over the place, and people do it. You'll have a resolution, instead of resolving, it'll resolve somewhere it shouldn't. You know, like you'll have a 2-5-1, but instead of resolving to the 1, it'll resolve to a minor chord, and that will become part of another 2-5-1. You'll have these cascading 2-5-1s or 3-6-2-5-1s, and people can really get lost. But once you understand the structure and you know what you're looking at, you can see, oh, this is part of this scale, and then when it modulates here, that's just part of this scale. These 4 scales, these 4 chords are all part of this scale, and I know the associated notes to play. I know the associated altered scales to play with that because I understand what tonal center we're resolving to, and I understand what key we're in, and I know what notes are being modified. I know that when I see an A7 flat 13, I know we're in the key of C, there's just a C sharp in there. Like, you can take so much guesswork and thinking out of your playing and out of your analysis that things become so fast because you see the underlying structure. You're not looking at the chord change and trying to analyze and trying to think of the scale and trying to think of how it's altered. You're thinking, I know what tonal center I'm in, and I know this one note is different, and that's it. So one more time, let me reiterate this third fundamental truth about music. The scales don't make the music. The chord changes and the physical properties of music are what make the scale. The scales are the result of the philosophical understanding of music after we've made the discoveries of these harmonic resolutions. How music resolves, how it works naturally in the physical world, led to our now understanding of scales and chord changes and complex theory. That is a philosophical byproduct of how music functions. So you need to know your scales, and there's some very interesting scales to play, but you need to know the context your scales are in. You need to understand where they come from, and this is where they come from. So let's recap, for those of you who have stayed this long, the three fundamental core philosophies of music. All of the fundamental building blocks are the same. C, E, G is the same as C sharp, E sharp, G sharp. Second one is that all of your building blocks of the major scale, your notes and the resolution tendencies associated with those notes, give you all of Western music. And third is that scales are a byproduct of the natural physical function of music. Music works in a certain way because that's how it works. And scales are things that we have discovered after the fact. So if you can really think about these three concepts and think about them every time you play, how music is built, and it will simplify music theory and everything you play. Because like I said, at the end of the day, you can make music as complicated as you want to make it, but it is simple building blocks that move and function in a certain way, and that's all music is. So those are the three philosophical truths behind all of Western music. They're the foundations of harmony, resolutions, and every melody you've ever loved. When you start thinking about music in this way, it's not about theory. It's about the philosophy of sound itself. And music stops being an abstract puzzle and starts becoming something you intrinsically understand. I hope this video opened up some new understanding of music for you, and I hope you know people that you can share this video with who would benefit them and also open their mind to how music truly works intrinsically. And if you want a deeper dive on the resolution tendencies and how theory works, you can watch these videos that I've got pinned here about the basics of music. And if you want to try the app when it comes out, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you'll see the videos when I drop the codes when the app finally goes live. And the first 50 people who get on it and who are subscribed will get some perks later on. So thank you for joining me, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.